Hey everybody, and welcome to another painting video. Today I'm going to be working on this Voldemort from the Night Models Harry Potter line. And let me just tell you real quick that one of the things that always surprises me whenever I look at a Night Models miniature is that they're always smaller than I think they are, because when you look at the detail close up, it's all very, very striking and very realistic. And so when you see pictures of them close up like this, you sort of assume that they're much larger than they are. But even though these are, I think these are listed as 35 millimeter miniatures. Let's just compare it to like this is a D&D wizard in a similar pose. And he's similarly sized, not counting all the extra bits hanging off. His head looks, well, I guess he's roughly the same, like overall, but he's a bit bulkier. And that's the thing about the Night Models minis, is they tend to be realistically proportioned, and therefore they tend to look smaller. So, yeah, so that's always an interesting surprise, like every time. I have another one here. This is Luna Lovegood. She came with him. I wasn't expecting her, but I'm planning to paint her at a later date, but not today. Today we're going to focus on Voldemort. By the way, in case you didn't know, this was a special limited edition model that was offered during their pre-order period for the Harry Potter miniatures adventure game thing that they were releasing. And I do not believe that this is available anywhere except for like eBay at this point. So yeah, so it's a one-off. I didn't get anything else from that pre-order. I just really thought this was an interesting looking model, and I really wanted to paint it. And I actually like the entire Harry Potter line, but I didn't really want to jump in with both feet on the Harry Potter adventure game, which is really the only way to get some of the core characters. And that's like $100 spend right off the bat to get a whole bunch of minis and a game that I don't necessarily want to play. But I also know that should I change my mind on that, I can do that in the future. And this was well, do it now or you won't be able to do it at all. So that's how I jumped into that. So let's get into the mini itself. It was a little bit of a chore to put together. This is a resin mini. It's not metal. And I I don't really care that I didn't put it together on camera, but it would have been nice to illustrate some of the points, because, like, for example, all the magic frou-frou that's coming off of his hands, that's like a single piece that included both arms, I believe. And so it connects in 3 points. It connects down here at the bottom. Whoop. Let's not break it. The arm connects to the sleeve, and then this arm connects to this sleeve. And to make it all the more difficult is that, you know, the cast didn't want to just fall into place there. It was a little bit off, which is to say that, like any resin casting, especially with something like that, something that's really spindly, it's never going to be exact. It's going to, depending on how early they pull it out of the mold, it might sag or it might flare. It's not going to be exact on. And so a little bit of pressure had to be applied to get each of the pieces into the proper locations. And with the kind of resin that they use, this is a gray, very very high detail, but also it's almost got like a ceramic feel to it. It doesn't really want to rebend. With a lot of resins, you can just apply some heat and it'll just bend and you get it right into place. This stuff really wants to resist that, and I didn't want to push it. I didn't want to apply an excess amount of heat, when it wasn't really necessary in this case. So everything went together. So you got that extra piece, you got the head, the jaw, the lower jaw on the snake head, this upper part of the snake. And I think that covers all of the pieces. I don't think there was anything else. And it went together pretty simply other than that. But it is a little worrying, especially because this is clearly a brittle resin. And so if you aren't careful, it would be possible to break these things. And I keep touching them and feeling like I'm going to break it. I just know it. So anyway, the only thing I wish I had not put on was his head. I wish I would have painted that separately. But I was in a hurry to just sort of get the whole thing together. And normally I like to fully assemble models as much as possible before painting them. And yeah, in this case, I think maybe the snake and the head would have been nice to leave off, but it'll be fine. So we're just going to get started. All right, so to get started, I have already primed this. So I started with Stynylrez Black, which I did over the whole thing. And then I did just a light layer from the top down of Stynylrez White. And this isn't really a pre-shade. I mean, it can kind of function that way, but my goal was really just to be able to see all the detail before I got started. I like doing this because it gives me a better sense of the mini as I get going. And the white does help when I'm using richer colors. It does help to make them pop. But in this case, I'm going to be starting with Emerald 5 from Watercolors. Emerald 5 is not something that I do use a lot, but this is going to be the darkest of the greens on here. I will eventually be moving toward black, I think, towards the inner recesses and stuff, but I'm going to start with this right now on the airbrush. Okay, my normal mix for Watercolors paint when I don't need a ton is I'll do 5 drops of my thinner and 3 drops of my paint right into the airbrush, and then just mix that up with a brush. There we go. So this is going to be all of the green areas. And just so you know, my concept for the paint on this is based on their studio model, which is probably an Angel Hernandez paint. I looked at, there's only one good photo of Voldemort casting spells online, and it doesn't do as much of the kind of object source lighting onto the clothing that the Studio Mini has, but I still like it. I actually think that the look of the OSL is very dramatic and very interesting. So I decided that I was going to go more towards their version, or his version, than the reality. Because in reality, you would see more of a almost like midnight blue robes with a little bit of green hint coming from the spell. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and just do all of his flesh as well. It might come through a little bit when I get around to painting the flesh. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but I am doing some 3D printing right now as well. Oh, good. This color is coming out how I'd hoped. Maybe not as dark as I'd hoped, but that's probably because of the white. If I'd started with black, it would be darker. But this is fine. This will be fine. All right, now I've mixed a black wash using that same Emerald Green 5 and black. And it's about 2 parts of the green to 1 part of the black, but black's still really strong, so it's going to still be the dominant color. The green mostly just helps tie this wash into the green we've already laid down. I'm focusing mostly on at the moment anyway, and I don't really want to get it on the spell effect. Because that is brighter on the whole, because that is our source light. And of course the way this is done, let's put this in the right place. The way this is lit, you know, the light obviously comes from here and is primarily on the upper body, but also on this leg and down on this side into the sleeves and what have you. It is kind of tough to tell a little bit on the model what's robe and what is spell effect, because this all sort of looks like spell effect, but I guess it's supposed to be robe. And that's okay if this layer desaturates the color a bit, because that's all going to get brought up again later. See how this sleeve goes down and sort of becomes the spell effect? I guess this is all supposed to be sleeve here, and then that's the spell going beyond, but it does make it tough to differentiate. All right, that wash did help bring the color down and provide some more contrast, but I really want there to be a stronger definition between the lower portion of the robes and the upper portion that are well lit by the spell. So I've got, this is just black. It's very thin. It's 5 parts reducer to 1 part war colors. And I'm just going to very carefully start at the bottom and work my way up. So this is going to reduce the contrast that currently exists on the colors on the lower robe. It's going to make it go more towards black than green, which is good. It's what I want, but I also want to retain some of that green. And if I go a little too far on that, it's okay, because we're going to come back with a brush later on and really punch up all the colors. All right, I think that's good. All right, so the next step here is Emerald 4, which is the next lighter step in the War Colors Emerald line. And now we're just going to focus primarily on those areas that are being lit by the spell. And the spell itself, although I'm not too worried about this right here because the spell is really going to get very bright, so I don't really need to do this same build up, but it doesn't hurt to start, tying the colors together now. But it's probably going to end up with Emerald 1 and brighter with a wash and some other stuff going on. So this is just a bit redundant. So again, the primary focus here is on source lighting. I have a reference picture up on my monitor nearby. And these colors are really transparent, so you don't have to be too extra careful. But you don't want to take it too far and then have to come back again and fix. But of course, with anything with source lighting, you always want to just be aware of where that lighting is coming from and how it's going to fall. So in this case, think of this as, this is all your source lighting, is this trail. And so the direction is generally here, and whatever is closest should be the brightest lit. And of course, the robe right here is touching. So that's going to be pretty bright. And these upper sleeves and his shoulders and the chest. And then with this color, you can also pick up like the severe highlights of other places that aren't completely hidden, like down here on the bottom of the robe, you can kind of see there's nothing really stopping the light from traveling down that way, so you can give that a little more color. But you do want there to be some fall off and some contrast between the upper portion and the lower portion. It also sort of brings your sight line, directly towards the focus, which is his face, primarily his face. So if you get too busy down on the bottom, then you're detracting from the kind of main focus of the mini. Okay, so now I have jumped up to Watercolors Emerald 2. There we go. All right, this is Emerald 2. And we're going to focus primarily on the chest and shoulders. And maybe this leg. All right, now we have moved on to Watercolors Emerald 1. And again, pretty much the same place as we were just working with Emerald 2. A little less on the leg. And then on the chest. And this is really kind of our final lighting color for the upper shoulders. Although I probably will come in with the brush with something just a bit brighter. And we'll go ahead and really kind of block out the spell here. I think this actually looks better on camera than it does in person. Actually, it looks pretty good. All right, moving on. All right, now I'm going to move on to the spell effect because I feel like I want to see more clearly where the light's coming from. So I figured this wouldn't be a bad place to start. And I've mixed equal parts Emerald 1 and white. And I'm just going to kind of overbrush the spell effect, which is, if you're not familiar with that, it's almost sort of like a wet dry brush, if that makes sense. You're kind of hitting the same places that you would hit with a dry brush, but you're just doing it with a lot more paint. And you just do it with the side of the brush. You don't want too much paint on there. You don't want to fill in the low points, but a little bit is going to kind of be inevitable. And since this whole thing, the whole spell is sort of self-illuminating, it almost doesn't make sense that you would do it like this, but it's fine. You could almost go the other way, where the lightest point was underneath and the darker points would be what I'm doing right now, but it's not what I want to do. Sometimes that just doesn't really work. It looks weird no matter what, even if it makes sense. And I think I may actually have too much white in this, but I can always wash this back down later. I will sit and think on it for a little bit. I think I got a little bit, yeah. One of the things I like about the watercolors is if you make a mistake like this, like I got some of this on the robe where I didn't necessarily want it, you can go in with just a little bit of water, even if it's been sitting there for a couple of minutes, and kind of just work it off with the brush. As long as the underside, the color underneath is fully dry, you can work off that the color you didn't want on there. Again, this is all because it's hard to tell the difference between the robe there and the spell effect. All right, I'm going to roll straight into doing some more highlights just with the Emerald 1. And this is very thin because this is the remnants of my airbrush paint. Now, in theory, if I brush this in, it will still be lighter than the bits that I airbrushed, because it's the color wasn't on there in sort of full opacity. So this is a good way to bring in some highlights but still have it be fairly subtle. I'm bringing my head in really close, and it's really hard to tell if I'm blocking the camera, so if I do, I apologize. But sometimes you just gotta get in there so that you can see what you're doing. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. So I'm trying to bring out the little creases and folds in the robe down here to provide more visual interest, a little bit more highlight. Just being really careful with it. And then of course I can go a little heavier on the chest, the sort of prominent portion of the chest, and the shoulders, and this upper portion of sleeve area, anything facing directly towards the spell effect. There's these edges of the robe here. And here. All right, and I still have some of that spell effect color with the white, but I'm going to mix that with the emerald that I still have sitting on my thumb to create a kind of final highlight. To just touch in the highest spots. I just realized I ignored the back side. All right, well, I'm going to do that part off camera. That's where we are on the front so far. And I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I did a couple of things off camera, aside from working on the back here, that I thought I should mention. First is I washed the whole spell effect with Warcolor Emerald 1. And that did two things. Well, three things, really. It made the recesses lighter, which is good. And it made the highlights darker. And really more saturated, which is really what I wanted. I wanted more color in the highlights. But it also brought the contrast down in general. It was just, I thought it was too contrasty. And that seemed to solve the problem very well, in my opinion. The other thing that I did is I took some Citadel shade, the Bealtan Green, and I made a very, very thin wash of it. I know it's already kind of a wash, but I wanted to make it less powerful. And then I washed it into the recesses on the robe. And I did that to also bring more richness to the color there. I didn't cover the whole thing. I just did it in the recesses, so it made it a little bit more, that provided a little bit more contrast to the folds, but it also brought some richness back into the color, which I thought I needed. So I'm very happy with how that turned out. And it was not something that was planned. It was just something that just sort of happened. I was looking at it and in both cases went, you know what I should do? And then I just did this really quick and I went, oh, I didn't do that on camera. And then I kind of did the same thing here. Mostly because at first it was just an experiment. It's like, would this work? And then I was like, oh, that doesn't make it worse. And then I kind of did the whole thing and went, okay, great. And I was done. So off camera. And now what I'm going to do is I have a little bit of Warcolor 2 and 3. And I'm going to pick some points on the lower robes. This is too much of a brush. I'm going to use this. By the way, I've been using these Citadel Artificer brushes, which are baller, man. They're great. They're just way too expensive. So if you end up with some, they're fantastic. Don't buy them, though, because they're like $10 more than they should be. So yeah, thin. This is kind of sticking prominently out here. So that'll probably, this is 3 that I'm working with right now. I gotta say, the part that I'm most intimidated by in this entire model is the snake. You know, looking at the direction of the spell, I kind of don't really need to do anything on the back, but they kind of, well, this area here sticks out a bit. It might catch some light from the spell. But the back here, not so much. I'm just going to leave this really subtle. I mentioned earlier that I don't want to, I don't really want to detract from this part of the model. so much. And yes, this is how I do some blending. That blends it out, it dries it out really quick. So you can do a little bit, blend it out, do a little bit more, blend it out. Little tappa. I don't do that a lot. Certain things lend itself to doing that, and most things don't. But broad bits of cloth, yeah, that's fine. Ooh. All right, well, we'll come back and fix that. Okay, off camera, I based out the flesh tones with Citadel. What the hell is that thing called? Oh, there it is. Bugman's Glow. And this was giving me a starting place. It's not going to be, his flesh won't be anywhere near this. But what I did do after that was I mixed up the Bugman's Glow with Watercolors Flesh 3 and then a little bit of the Emerald 1, which is a really hideous color. But I think that's going to be closer to where we end up with his flesh tones, because he's getting a lot of light on his flesh from the green spell effect as well. So as hideous as this color is, I think in context it will at least look correct. He's got very pale skin to start with. And then with the green lighting on top of that, it is not going to look like human skin, like our human tissues at all. Sorry about that. Did I just talk right into the mic? That's not a good thing to do. I'd kind of forgotten where I put that. Yeah, and as it is, this color is still pretty dark from where we want to end up. But this is good. We're working that green into there, which is what we want. Boy, that's an awful color. It looks like somebody puked on him. All right, so now I've added some Flesh 2, Watercolors Flesh 2, to lighten this pukey green color that we've created. And I think this brush is too big now. And by the way, if you've never painted a night model's face before, it's a challenge. They're super detailed and very tiny. All right, so I'm going to attempt to highlight this without getting my big ass head in the way. This is first layer highlights. I guess technically second, if you count the last thing we did over the Bugman's Glow as a highlight. Or first if you don't. I'm pretty happy with how this looks. Sometimes your eyes will tell you that that's not right, this is terrible. Even if your brain is saying, no, really, this is how this should be. And sometimes you want to listen to your brain. Alright, I'm going to have to get this up close to my face in order to do this. So hopefully it's going to be enough that I've explained my intention here rather than seeing it all. So I'll be back. So I felt like I'd been spending a lot of time off camera on this face, and I'm okay with it. These are rough. Anything from Night Models, the faces, again, so much detail, so little space. It's tough, especially when you try and paint eyes. And so far, like I'm okay. It still needs some work, and I will probably do more of that off camera. But one of the things that I'm not entirely happy with at the moment is that the flesh tones aren't as green as I'd actually like them to be. So what I'm going to do is I got some of this Bealtan green. I'm mixing it very thin to create a glaze, and I'm just going to add that over the flesh tones to put the green back in. And it also does a little bit of a wash. And maybe that'll help the how I feel about the head and face overall. Maybe. We'll see. I mean, I have to say that as I was working on the face, I was pretty happy with the general direction of the colors. But there really was kind of almost too much life in them. They were too red, and it contrasted weirdly with the overall green tone of the model. Oh yeah, this is actually helping a lot. I guess another problem I have with this model is that his face, he doesn't have a nose, really. He sort of does, but he doesn't. And so it's very weird to try and highlight him. And the details of his mouth are a little odd. I mean, he looks like he's supposed to look. It's just, it's different. It's not what I'm used to. All right, I'm going to play with this a little bit more off camera, but I just wanted you to see where we were headed here, and so maybe I can be happy with it when I'm done. So I'll be back. Okay, as it turns out, the more green I added to the flesh, the happier I became with it overall. So, there we go. So it's pretty green. But you can still tell the difference between the flesh and the robes, which is the important thing. So now I'm reasonably happy with it. So I'm going to get started on the snake, and I've actually been having a bit of trouble figuring out exactly where I wanted to go with the snake. So I'm going to kind of wing it a little, maybe. But we need a base color, and I think I want something. I probably should have figured this out before I started the camera back up, but you know, these things happen. You know what? Let's no, not that. This is yeah. We're gonna mix up. We're gonna mix up a color. Like I said, we're gonna wing it. So this is Steel Legion Drab, which is essentially just brown. All right. We just need that, and we need a little white. Where's my white? Where is my white? You know what? We'll use flush too. All right. All right. So this is essentially like a tan. We're starting with a tan color here. Not my best. Not my best effort here. All right, having chosen a general direction for the snake, I'm going to start adding some markings that are essentially going to look a little bit like just camouflage patterns. And this is Warcolors Brown 4, which is really transparent, and I may need to use a different color later. But this is kind of a red-brown color. And I'm just going to pick a spot to start on. And just start going around. And making some kind of regularly recurring stripes. And this is going to be tedious. So I'm not going to do it on camera, but I did want to get started here so that you could see. And as you can see, well, let's see if we can get to focus. The color is pretty transparent, but I think that's okay. I think I'm going to be all right with that. I might want to outline it, outline the stripes in either dark brown or black when I'm done to further define that. And, you know, once I've worked my way across the body, I'll come back and show you where I am. So snake markings are done. So I did just do that brown 4, and then I outlined it with black. But then I went and I washed the whole thing with a wash that I made using brown 5, Warcolors Brown 5. And it just sort of ties everything together, which is really nice. But up front here, I feel like there's going to be some residual green coming from the spell. So I've mixed up a little Emerald 3, very thin, sort of like 4 parts thinner to 2 parts paint. And I just want to bring some of the green into the tail over here. It doesn't take much. That should do it. Really just enough to imply the light coming from the spell onto the snake. All right, I think that's good. And so what's next? Oh, right. The mouth. Be right back. So snake mouths are kind of cool. I mean, one of the fun things about doing projects like this is spending a little time doing research. There is some variation to what the inside of a snake's mouth looks like, but in general, the flesh tones are very light. So this is Citadel Pallid Witch Flesh. I just wanted something here that was light, that covered reasonably well, that got me, into the direction I wanted to go with this. Man, I am all over the place. The problem is, of course, trying to do this on camera. Want to get it on the teeth and on the exterior parts of the mouth there without getting it all over everything else. All right, then we'll let that dry. All right, I've made a wash of Watercolors Pink 5, which is a very dark color. But I find that both that and the Purple 5 tend to work really well as like mouth colors, interior mouth colors. This is already a little darker overall than I wanted, but I kind of like it, and actually it's all right. Yeah, that's fine. I think once I get the teeth, it'll look much better. All right, let that dry. Okay, back to the Pallid Witch Flesh on the teeth. These little ones is tough. I think I got it. Okay, that looks really good. All right, so the final thing I'm going to do now is his eye. You know what, I can... Snake eyes are generally just black. I'm sure there's more going on to them, but at this scale, it's just black. Let's see if I can get the other one. Do a little cleanup there. All right, that looks good. So the last thing I was going to do is I really wanted to put some more black into the deep recesses of the lower portions of this. So I am going to do that. I'm going to do a little bit here. I'm going to do the rest off camera. And then I am going to call it done. Whoops. I immediately get black on the snake. That's perfect. But I'm going to call it done and go take some pictures that you can see. So I'm going to do that. Just bring a little black into there. Take pictures. Momentarily, you will see final photos. Hey, and I just want to thank everybody for showing up for another one of my painting videos. I know I don't do these very often anymore. And I always say I'm going to do more, and then I don't. But hey, my work time is really busy these days. So I just counted up my minis for 2018, and I am well over 500 minis painted. So if you're wondering why I don't do a lot of videos anymore, that's why. Anyway, thanks again. I'll talk to you all later. And here are the photos.